Welcome to the place where you'll hear from HR leaders, people experts, and wellbeing professionals. You'll learn about their personal and professional journeys, hear about the future of HR and wellbeing, and take away actionable insights and tips. This is the HR and Wellbeing Insider Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the HR and Wellbeing Insider Podcast. Today I'm talking to Lucinda Reader, founder of Ravello HR. Lucinda's going to be talking about her journey from Harrods to Metro Bank and why she set up Ravello HR. We're also going to touch on some challenges and trends for businesses, as well as the ever-evolving role of HR and people within business. Listen in for expert advice and real-world experience. Hi, Lucy. Thank you for coming on the podcast and welcome.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Super. Lovely to have you here. To start with, it'd be great to get to know a little bit about you and what drew you to HR and a little bit about your journey from Harrods to Ravello HR.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Paul. So I started in the very cutthroat recruitment agency industry. I was about 17. It was a very different world back then. It was, as I say, very cutthroat, and I definitely learned a lot from it. It gave me my love of recruitment. I think I've always had a fascination with people. I can't just meet somebody. I have to know everything about them, what they do. Like, I'm fascinated by people's careers and how they got there. So it probably wasn't a surprise that I ended up in HR. And I spent a lot of time in recruitment, which I love, because obviously that's literally talking to people about their careers. And I've kind of pivoted throughout my career into HR generalist roles, specialist ER roles, and to give me a really rounded experience, because I always had this end in sight of knowing that I wanted my own HR consultancy. And so what I kind of did was use my professional career to really build that out and get to know all of the best practice of different industries, different businesses, different brands, to then ultimately be able to convert that into solutions for clients. So yeah, I started in recruitment agencies, ended up in Harrods. I ran the temp campaigns, so all of the sale and Christmas stuff. I used to recruit for Father Christmas. I think that's probably one of the most interesting things about me.
Yeah, that is exciting. Who doesn't want to recruit for Father Christmas?
And the elves, I used to recruit Santa's grotto. I was always very popular with all my friends and family around Christmas time because they all wanted to spot to see Father Christmas. But do you know what? It was intense. It was really high pressure, really transactional, really high volume, but it taught me how to operate in that kind of environment and gave me a really good grounding. I then moved into more specialist recruitment. I set up the Harrods recruitment agency, which was a really interesting concept to provide a solution to concessions. So again, just so much incredible learning. I left Harrods, went to Australia, worked in Australia for a while, which was great. I worked for Hayes. And then an RPO for a really cool worldwide company called Striker that's entirely behaviour driven. And high performance. Again, just got all these really, really interesting experiences. Came back to the UK, went to Kurt Geiger. Again, really interesting because they're private equity, so totally different to what I'd done before. Did a hybrid talent and recruitment role there, and then moved to Metro Bank. I spent about 7 years at Metro Bank, so I joined during the absolute growth spurt, the growth period, which was brilliant because we built it really from the ground up. It was an incredible environment to be in. And then Ravello HR was born.
Exciting. So you've learned a lot there. You talked about cutthroat recruitment.
Yes.
And I suppose it was different back then to where we are now in 2025.
Yes.
What did the HR landscape look like back then? Because I imagine it's probably very different to where we are now.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. And it's one that I think we talk about. I'd certainly talk about a lot with my clients because it was very generalist driven. So you didn't tend to have the kind of specialisms that you have now. Everyone was a generalist in HR. Recruitment, you still had your deep expertise, your headhunters. That hasn't changed dramatically, but your HR landscape really has, because now, you've got OD specialists, talent specialists, reward specialists. Whereas then it was very much generalist HR. You still had business partners, but depending on what business you worked in, I think that business partner role was very broad.
Yeah. In terms of specialisms now, it can be a much wider role rather than just typical HR. I remember when I sort of first started an employed role, it was literally just HR. There was no recruitment,
Yeah.
talent,
Yeah.
well-being, employee relations. It was just one or two people doing everything.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
imagine from a Ravello HR perspective and your own consultancy,
Yeah.
you can sort of step into each segment as and when needed. Is that sort of what you do there?
Yeah, definitely. I'm lucky enough to have the years I've spent in the industry. I've got some really great people in my network. So, I'm very quick to say that is not my expertise. Reward or something like that is not my area of expertise, but I've got people that I can call on to help with that. But yeah, generally, I'm lucky enough to have worked in all of the specialisms for a solid period of time to have given me the ability to actually operate and consult in different areas of HR, which I think it's really important if you want to go down the consulting route, because it's very rare to have a real unique niche unless you're a day rate contractor.
Really interesting. And in terms of people, what about the people function and about people actually keeps you really energized? Because it can be difficult at times.
Yeah, I think it's different people's motivations and their different motivations. I love getting to grips and getting to the bottom of what makes people work really well. And I think, there's definitely a science to people, right? But everybody is so different. And, I've used everything, all the different behavioral testing, performance metrics over the years. And I think that's what keeps me going, is there are so many different ways to get to the bottom of what makes people tick and what makes people work really effectively, that I just love it. And I love working with businesses because I talk about this a lot. I am a bit of a broken record about this, but if you've got a people plan, then your business plan will work. If you don't have a people plan, your business plan will not work. I will never, ever back down on that. So I love working with a business and actually helping them to bring to light how their people will underpin their business plan, and they see it and then they start to see the results. So it's so rewarding.
Yeah. And actually, you talk about that. And what we see a lot of now is HR having a seat at the table,
Yes.
being part of the board and also other business leaders looking at the commercial side of people.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that something that sort of small to medium businesses struggle with? Do they still see people as a cost?
Yes. They just see HR as a cost center. They don't often see the influence and the change that you can make by having the right people in the right place at the right time can make to your business. So yeah, I am a huge advocate of it. I talk about it a lot, and you see the light bulb often go off in, I'll be talking to someone and I'll be explaining why your people plan, your skills matrix, your competency framework underpins the success of your business. And when they see it, that's when the magic starts to happen.
Yeah. So you've really got to help them understand that sort of people
Yes.
plan and how it can also be commercial.
Because it's a generational thing as well. Like, a lot of people won't see the benefit and the value in HR that HR can bring. So they often will just, I say this and people laugh, but people, drinking tea in the kitchen, just, talking about people's woes. And I'm like, that's not HR. That's not the role of, although maybe sometimes, but there's so much more to it. I think it's an education piece.
Yeah. And there is a lot to it because you've got people, you've got well-being, you've got the need to keep good people within a business, and
Yes.
also that need to attract really good talent.
Yeah,
And it's super competitive out there.
it
From a
is.
people sort of strategy perspective, how does a HR leader stay connected to that human side, that emotional side of HR, but also balance that with business needs and business requirements?
Yeah. You've got to be commercial as a HR leader. If you have got to understand how your business makes money, and you've got to understand what the specialisms are within that are needed. If you don't understand that, you are not a HR partner. And you would be surprised the amount of people that are operating in a HR role who do not know how their business makes money. Yeah, but because people just see HR as their specialism. I'm like, no, you've got to understand the business's struggles, the business's potential, to be able to then support them as a people function, because you need to understand the industry in itself as well. I think recruiters are often great at knowing the business, the industry, because they're talking about it day in, day out. Whereas I think HR and business partners often get into a real rut of not really being close enough to the business and just focusing on HR as an industry. But you've got to be commercial. You've got to spend the time with the business. When I was in the corporate world, if I took on a new area as a HR business partner, the first thing I did was went and spent a week with them. I want to know what you do. I want to know how you operate. I want to know what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, because I want to help you improve. But I can't do that just from a weekly catch-up, you telling me what the problems are and me talking at you and giving you solutions. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. And that makes sense, doesn't it? I think that whole word or the area of being commercial is really important. And I
Yes.
mean, in terms of business now, we talk a lot, especially since COVID, around purpose and beliefs and people wanting to be part of something really meaningful.
Yeah.
In terms of you and your experience and background, have you got any personal beliefs or strategies that you use when it comes to people strategy within business?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think, my personal philosophy is that change is good and you've got to be willing to embrace change. And if you're not, then I can't work with a business, because I think that's really dangerous to get into the territory of a business that doesn't want to change. They just want to keep doing what they're doing, make that more efficient. But so change is absolutely my philosophy. Change is good, embrace it, always see the opportunity. And I say that, when I mentor people and give career advice, I say a sideways step for change is brilliant. That's a great opportunity. Whatever's happening in the business that you're in, see the potential in it. So I think embracing change is great. And then from a business point of view, the first thing I'll often do going into a business is to look at their skills, look at what kind of mapping that they've got, look at things like their job descriptions, their competencies, because what you need is a skills matrix, because you need to know what skills you got in the business, what skills you need for your business to succeed. And then you can work out where the gaps are. So I talk about talent mapping all the time. That is so crucial if you want to be a successful business, because otherwise you just end up in this struggle, the war for talent. You end up drowning in that because you're going to market at the last minute. Whereas actually, if you can do a people plan, I mean, 3 to 5 years is ambitious, right? I'm not suggesting any business can plan further than 12 months on a people plan, right? We'd all like it to be 3 to 5 years, but even 12 months ahead, if you can look and say, well, this is, if you've got a product, this is the product we need to take to market for the business to work. You can then work that back and say, well, who do you need to design the product? Who do you need to market it? Who do you need to sell it? And so that then gives you a really clear people strategy. And that is the difference between a business succeeding and not.
Yeah, I love that. I think having a strategy is really important. And I think in other roles like sales, business development, there's always a strategy, there's always a
Yes.
pipeline, there's always
Yes.
targets and KPIs.
Yeah.
And so you've talked about skills matrix and talent mapping there, and
Yeah.
actually having a people plan. And in terms of a people plan, should that be communicated with the whole workforce? And if so, what is the benefit of doing that?
It depends. I think, you might have some things in there that you're not ready to market externally yet, in which case you'd probably keep that at a senior leader level. But if you know that, if it's widely spoken about and everyone's bought into the business plan, which I think is a real positive. If you look at when I joined Metro Bank, everybody was clear. Everybody, no matter where you worked, could recite what the business plan was. And that was really powerful. But, if you want to break that down into a really granular level and be really transparent about the roles that you're going to be hiring in the next 12 months, that also incentivizes people. And you can then give people the opportunity to upskill. So rather than go to market in 12 months for that specialist role, you might have someone that's nearly there and you're actually better investing in them to improve their skills and to get there, because then you're going to increase employee engagement. You've got some really great news. Colleagues will then look around and think, wow, I could do that as well. So I think there's a lot of merit to doing that. It just depends on what kind of restrictions you've got.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I think it's about being smart and also communicating, which is really important.
Totally.
And you also touched on change, and that change is really good, which I
Yeah.
agree with.
Yeah.
And it can also be really scary for
Yes.
leaders, for employees, particularly in the current economic climate.
Yeah.
So when we think about change from a HR and people perspective, what can businesses do to really help their people with change and communicate change in the right way without scaring employees off?
Yeah. I think it's constant communication. The worst thing you can do is, spring things on colleagues and surprise them. And sometimes it's unavoidable, right? In this current climate, that, I'm the first one to agree that is sometimes unavoidable. But if you can just keep that communication flowing, and it doesn't need to be, big town halls, big communications. If you can make sure your leaders are able to communicate effectively with their teams, you'll have a really bought-in workforce, and you'll have people believing in the brand, continuing to believe in it. Whereas if you keep promising things at a really senior level and then, you go 6 months because you've hit a delay, but you're not communicating that, that's when people become disillusioned. So actually, if you can just keep that, updating people when there might not be much to update on, but that's fine. Tell them that. I think, Have some really clear milestones of when you're going to communicate, what you're going to communicate, and just stick to it and be, your leadership team needs to be present and visible.
Yeah, I love that. And communication is key, isn't it? And like you said there, I think a key point is even if there's nothing really to communicate, still
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah.
I've been in so many scenarios where I've sat and I've thought, well, what's happening and what's
Yeah.
next? And
Yeah.
then the response is, oh, nothing. But
Yeah.
if you don't know nothing's happening, that can have a real impact. I think, especially when we think about our own well-being and mental health and
Yes.
people's anxiety.
Yeah.
So I really love that tip. Really, really
Yeah,
cool. Really,
and you fill the blanks. Naturally, we all do it as human beings. If we're not given enough information, we start to scenario plan in our heads and we go, well, what if they're not telling us that? And that becomes really toxic because people start talking. So if you can just quash that entirely, just be really upfront and say, look, we haven't got anything to tell you because we're stable at the moment as a business. We don't have any grand plans. We just want to maintain where we are. People will be really grateful for that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really agree. And in terms of like the economic climate we've talked about and change, what do you think the key trends and challenges might be over the next few years for HR? Because the world is moving fast. AI is coming, is here right now. What do you think some of the trends and challenges are that are of interest to you and other businesses?
I mean, I think I'd be a fool not to say the digital transformation, the AI that can be used. I think, Chat GTP or GPT, what I mean, that app that I click.
Yeah.
I think there's some really powerful ways that businesses can use AI. So if you look at Shira, who I work with, the mental health app, we've got Shuru, which is a guru, an AI generated guru who you can talk to and you can get some coaching, some advice, some mentoring on the spot. You don't have to wait for that. So I think businesses can really hone it and use it to create like a manager self-serve environment to answer some of the basic questions, because managers and HR, I think there's always this battle of what should be self-serve and what should be advice. I think if you can find a really good medium there where you empower managers to do some of that self-serve by using AI, I think you could save a lot of time. And I think you could create better informed managers because it's not an ask and tell environment. It's people seeking and self-serving. So I think that's really interesting, a really good opportunity in use of AI. And I think probably performance management. I mean, this one, there's always a full cycle on this. And I think businesses are becoming more behavioural based because I think values and behaviours are becoming more important to people as in candidates. So I think businesses are starting to shift to realizing that. So moving away from the typical performance management when it's just purely, once a year talking about your performance, the performance of the company, it's more about your behaviors and your contribution to the company throughout the year. I'm seeing more businesses start to take that approach, which I think you need leaders that are able to manage that. And so it takes some upskilling, it takes a lot to get you to that point. But I think if you can get that right, that's really quite powerful.
Yeah. I mean, who enjoys a once a year appraisal, right?
No
Um,
one.
no, I was going to say, I certainly don't. And I think values purpose is really important now. People have sort of reevaluated since COVID, I'm going to say it again, but people have reevaluated what work means to them and what purpose is. I certainly
Absolutely.
did. I didn't want
Yeah.
to go to work 9 to 5 every day into a bog
Yes.
standard job without making a meaningful impact. And I think people
Absolutely.
can bring that into the people strategy, bring it into business and have those conversations. That can be very, very powerful.
Yeah, and I think we've changed as a society. Whereas 5 years ago, perhaps we went to an office, we were quite institutionalized because we sat with colleagues in an office 5 days a week, and that was the norm. I think it shifted, and people started to put a lot more value on their personal lives, their family lives, their hobbies, and so suddenly the two worlds have started to collide, and we're seeing more of people bringing their authentic selves to work. And where businesses are celebrating that and encouraging that, they're seeing success. So I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely played a huge part.
Definitely, definitely. And I think well-being is massive. So I'm going to touch on well-being here,
Yeah,
but you've talked about Shura and some of the work you've
yeah.
done there. How has that changed since you first started out in the HR world and in your career in terms of HR benefits and well-being?
Yeah, I think it used to really just be a tick box exercise, and it was something that recruiters used as a tool to secure people. Oh, we've got a better private health or whatever, come and work for us. I don't think people or businesses put much value on what that actually meant. Whereas now there's so much more insight, data, and research into happy people in the workplace create better businesses, better results, better performance, all of that. So I think businesses are starting definitely to join the dots and realizing that it shouldn't just be a tick box exercise. I mean, and making sure that your employees are okay is a basic requirement, right? But I think now businesses are really starting to understand that if they invest in their people and their people's mental well-being as well as their physical well-being, you get a much better outcome for everybody. And I think employees feel more empowered to ask now, and to seek this kind of support and to talk about it, which is brilliant.
They absolutely are. I think people are definitely thinking about their well-being, and
Yeah.
it's not just about, can I earn an extra £3,000 by going to a new role?
Yeah.
If I'm going to lose my private healthcare or my mental
Yeah.
health benefits. And I think that's definitely changed, which I think has changed for the better, I must
Yeah,
admit.
me too. Me too.
And in terms of your personal journey, so Harrods, going to Australia, Metro Bank, and now your own consultancy, what's one of the biggest challenges you've had and how did you get around it?
So I left school at 16 and went straight into the workplace. I didn't go to college, I didn't go to university, I didn't do any of that. And I was told a lot that would hinder me. And I was told, sometimes I shouldn't have been considered for senior roles because I didn't have a degree and things like this. So I had to fight really hard against that. I think the world has probably shifted a bit now. There's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more social diversity, but that was always a battle for me. And, I'm a very positive person. I'm also a very confident person. I was raised to believe that I can do anything. So that has had a profound effect on my ability to keep going. But that could have hindered me. I mean, I was told, I won't say the business, but I was told that I needed to go to finishing school once because I didn't speak the same way as my colleagues. I didn't go to a red brick uni. And I was told that I'd never be able to secure the luxury clients and things like that. But I did. I think people buy into honesty and familiarity. I think, I could be quite familiar with people because I can find a way. I've traveled a lot. That's my superpower. I could always find somewhere that I've been that someone else will have. So I've definitely, it's definitely been a hindrance, but I'm really glad that I took that path. I don't regret it at all because I've had more life experience and I've had more professional experience than I would have had. Most of my roles, I started in entry level and then progressed through the ranks. So when I was then senior or a leader in those roles, I was able to really understand what my team were doing because I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big challenge, actually. And I think there has been a shift from driving, people to go to university, get degrees, etc. I never went to university. I was a holiday rep for a couple of years, and that gave me a lot of people experience.
Totally, yeah.
It's tough, right? And that's how you learn and you build your experience. What would you say to people that are listening to this who might be in HR or in roles where they want to sort of do a little bit more, but they feel like they haven't got the experience and they feel like they haven't got the degree? What would you say to them now to really help them sort of propel their career and encourage them and inspire them to go and do and follow a similar journey to what you've done?
I think be willing to take side steps. I'm such an advocate of progression doesn't need to mean promotion. If you're given an opportunity, if there's a project, just always stick your hand up for it. Anything that came across my way, I was always so eager to learn and to get to grips with and deliver. And that has helped me dramatically because what that's done is given me insight into other teams, other areas that I've then perhaps moved into permanently. Or I think it rounds your decision making then when you do become a senior HR leader. The decisions you make aren't just based on a pigeonhole career. You're making those decisions based on like other people's experiences, other people's insights. So yeah, I can't say this enough. Sidestep. If there's an opportunity, if there's something, even if it's something you wouldn't have perhaps thought about, just go for it, learn it. You might not love it. You don't need to, but you'll have learned it and you'll have tried it. I think there's so much put now on climbing the ladder really quickly that people aren't actually learning in those roles because it's like promotion. That's the only way to make more money, excel. But yeah, if you can change your thought process on that and find really good projects, and also volunteering, learning from different businesses, there's so much to learn out there from people.
Yeah. And I would agree. I mean, for me personally, I started out in my career thinking I need to go higher and higher and higher and higher.
Yeah, you'll do. Yeah.
And that is the sort of standard approach, I think, or the standard mindset. Whereas actually more recently, I'm not so bothered about my job title. What I'm bothered about is, do I enjoy my work? am I having a really good impact? And have I got flexibility? And actually is about sidestepping and learning more and taking more on.
Yeah.
So really, really good tip. I love that. And talking about life experience and personal journeys, you're also a volunteer.
Yes.
It'd be great to just hear a little bit more about that and the impact you're having there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with No Going Back. So they are a charity who rehabilitate offenders. So people that are about to be released or sort of 3 to 6 months from police state, they work with No Going Back and they get them into the workplace. I started working with them about a year ago, and what we started doing was building out interview workshops to go into the prisons and deliver. Because especially in the youth, the young offenders, some of these guys won't ever have had an interview. They probably won't have even had a job, but they've got skills and they've got things to contribute to society. So the workshops are really about bringing out their best bits, teaching them about what an interview is, teaching them the do's and don'ts of an interview, and just equipping them with the skills to go out and start to contribute to society. I'm a huge, huge, huge believer in people deserve second chances. We've all made mistakes. Some of us have, had privileged lives where our mistakes haven't necessarily had the same gravity as other people's mistakes. But if people want to, I mean, the programs are all voluntary. They don't have to be part of this. These guys and girls put their hands up for it. But when they work with the charity and when they are placed into work, the reoffending rate is only between 5 and 7%. Yeah. So it's, the proof's in the pudding. It's you're creating people that are going back out into society with the intent on bettering their lives. So yeah, I'm really passionate about it. It's a wonderful thing to be part of. And I go into the workshops and there's often a lot of attitude, and especially in the young offenders, a lot of disillusioned people. And after the sessions, you just see the light and the hope in their eyes that people are believing in them, and people are going to facilitate a way for them to integrate back into society again. It's very rewarding.
Sounds really impactful and actually, again, really meaningful to help these
Yes.
people, have
Yes.
that second chance. Is there anything from that experience you've taken away that you bring into sort of your professional life, sort of from doing that work? Because that's not an easy job, doing a
Yeah.
volunteering role like that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've always had this approach, but I'm very much, I treat everybody with compassion and kindness. I can be extremely tough to work with and for that, I have very high expectations of people, but I treat everybody, as I say, with kindness, with respect. It doesn't matter the job, doesn't matter where I am. And I think working with the charities just reinforced that you don't know everybody's story. You don't know what people have gone through. You don't know what people are going through. I think HR have a real responsibility to role model that. Part of too many disciplinaries to count in my time. And I can honestly tell you, I think everybody would have walked out of that room and agreed that I treated them with respect and the kindness that they deserve. Because, in HR, you're dealing with people and human beings' lives. And you have the fortunate part of you have the fortunate job of being part of their great, and positive life celebrations like babies and weddings and all the promotions and all the wonderful things. But you're also there on the other side of it where people are going through grief, stress, losing their jobs. So I think you've got to have a lot of humility. And I think working with the charity just reinforces that for me. And it just is that constant reminder.
Yeah, that's really lovely. And I think that the most simple way is be kind.
Absolutely.
Really, really important. And I think particularly when we talk about HR and well-being and people, I think being kind is really
Yeah.
important in every
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've touched on some of your challenges. Tell me what's one of the most proudest moments of your career to date?
That's a hard one. The proudest moment. I think probably when I was in Harrods, I was made the manager of the temp team really young. I was like early 20s. And given that, again, I came from a background that wasn't a professional background, didn't come from university or anything. I think that was a really proud moment for me because it was purely down to hard work and determination. And I am super ambitious. So I think that was, that always, I think it was probably quite a defining point of my career. I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. And I think it gave me the grounding to be a better leader. And then kind of, on the other end of it, starting out my consultancy, it's always really scary going into, working on your own. But what I was amazed by was that I think I'm a year and a half in now over that. All of my clients have come from recommendations. And I think, I kind of sat there and reflected on that last month and thought, I think that is testament to the fact that I am, I do love working with people, and I will give people as much as I can. I'm terrible for it. Like, I genuinely forget that I have to earn money, because I just love helping people and giving people advice and helping people where I can. But that's really been repaid, and people have been absolutely incredible in giving me recommendations, passing me work and helping me to build the consultancy to where it is today.
Yeah. I mean, what things to be proud of, right? I mean, hard work, determination, setting your own business up in this economic climate.
Yeah.
Having testimonials, getting those referrals, really, really lovely to hear. To finish today's podcast, it'd be great to understand one more thing from you, which is, what's one thing you wish HR people would talk about more openly?
Great question, Paul. What do I wish HR people would talk about more openly? I think, and I mean, I am like a broken record about this, but I do get really frustrated that HR people don't talk about this, is the skills in the business. I just wish people would spend the time in identifying what skills they've got and how they can then cross-train within. I talk to a lot of businesses and they say, "Oh, we haven't got any money for training." And I say, "But you've got resource available. You don't need any money. You've got people who can cross-train your other employees to upskill them." Like, I use an example, things like, if you've got a procurement team, right, they are going to be excellent at negotiation. That's their job. That's what they do. So if you've got a procurement team and you've got a recruitment team who perhaps aren't performing particularly well, struggling with counter offers and struggling with closing offers, you've literally got a team that can train them in that. So I just wish people would spend more time assessing the skills they've got in the business, because you don't need any money to do that. You can do that really easily, and that you will get so much return from that, because then people feel invested in, you create great mentorship opportunities, and you're more likely to get longevity from your colleagues and your employees.
Yeah. Talking about skills, definitely not what I expected, but actually really makes sense. And I think using the people internally, saving budget, not always needing to go external, what a great thing to be talking about more and more in business.
Yeah.
Really, really good advice and tips there. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a really good experience. I will link the organisations below so people can take a look.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Thanks for listening to this episode of the HR and Wellbeing Insider podcast. If you enjoyed this content, please make sure to follow us over on LinkedIn and sign up to our monthly newsletter, which will include hints, tips, and news on all things people and wellbeing. You'll also hear from some of our guests. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode.